And now it's time for Hobo Reviews with Willie B.A. Hobo. Tonight's review, Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Oh my God, this is the best movie I've ever seen in my whole life. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you please? Won't you please? Please won't you be my spoilers? There's this guy named Fred Rogers, also known as Mr. Rogers, who starts his episode just like any other fucking episode of Mama. He enters a door and says, "It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood." But you already know that shit of Mama. And then he gets his business coat taken off because we don't like to see Mr. Rogers in a business suit of Mama. And then he puts on his sweater, Mama. Kind of like this one, but without, the little emblems in Mama. And so then he shows us this pictograph. It's got doors, and you pop open the door, and there's a person. He's got Mr. McFeely in there. I swear to God, I think they got the actual Mr. McFeely from the original Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood in this movie, Mama, for that one scene that he's going to be in just a moment, Mama. But it also shows the picture of some guy with a cut in his nose and his eye, Mama. Because it looked like he was caught in a fight, Mama. And people are wondering, how does this get into a Mr. Rogers movie, you might ask, Mama? Well, Mr. Rogers gets to know this guy because this guy happens to be an editor for the Esquire magazine, Mama. He writes articles and all that wonderful stuff for that magazine. Except he's like your average Joe. Is like, I don't like life. I'm just doing this just to have a living, Mama, because I have a family and kids to support and I gotta do this blah, 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 check the box, blah, 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 blah. And so then he gets into his fight with his father, Mama. Played by the guy who you might remember from The Patriot, Mama. He played opposite of Mel Gibson, Mama. You know, the guy who was supposed to run the army and then he gave it off to Mel Gibson's character, Mama. That guy. Well, anyways, he plays the dad of this character who gets a cut because he punches his dad, some guy punches him. I'm guessing it was his sister's fiance, Mama, or something like that. Anyways, that's how he gets the black eye, or the cut, or whatever, Mama. And so Mr. Rogers tells us about how a magazine is made, courtesy of Speedy Delivery, because Mr. McFeely comes in. And I swear to God, it's the actual Mr. McFeely from the original Mr. Rogers. He gives us a magazine, he gives us a videotape cassette, Mama, that we put in the frame, Mama. And then we look in the frame and see that it's actually how you make a magazine, Mama. Which is basically how, like, you make a newspaper, Mama. To be perfectly honest, Mama. And so then Mr. Rogers sees this transitions into the guy in real life that he speaks to. And he's given an assignment. He is to interview Mr. Rogers because the subject is all about him being a hero. Which, quite frankly, he is a fucking hero because he makes a lasting impact to generations. Just like Sesame Street, Mama. I, for one, love Sesame Street, Mama, but that's for another time and another movie, perhaps, Mama. So anyways, Mr. Rogers gets to meet this guy because he comes to his set in Pittsburgh. Because Mr. Rogers, if little known fact, did his stuff in Pittsburgh. Just like Bob Ross did his shit in Indiana in Muncie. Because small areas make for big success, apparently, Mama. Hey, that could be good for me at some point. So anyways, he interviews him and then he starts to get a change of heart, Mama. He starts to feel because Mr. Rogers reverses stuff and asks, "Oh, how are you today? What kind of feelings do you have today?" And he's like, no, I'm not the emotional lovey-gooey guy. Go away, please, Mama. And then he gives him his puppet, Mama. King Friday the 13th, I presume. Correct as usual, King Friday, except you're speaking to yourself, Mama. And the tiger, whose name cannot be on the tip of my tongue. Oh, how the hell do you not know that, Willie? Remember, I'm summing up a movie, Mama. I don't go into detail like you, Commander Massander. So anyways, he's like, no, get rid of the dolls. It's jolly. I don't like it. But then he has visions and hallucinations and all that crazy stuff. And he realizes, I need to be a changed man because I'm like the Grinch in the magazine world. And so, because of Mr. Rogers, who teaches him how to handle his anger in an appropriate way, like smashing the lower keys on the piano. Bong, bong, bong. Look at me. Bong, bong, bong. Or even going swimming, Mama. I, for one, like swimming. Look, I have goggles to prove it. I like to swim, Mama. Yeah. And so anyways, Mr. Rogers does all that to get rid of his anger. Which he barely does have any anger, but little anger he has, he gets rid of it by doing all that stuff. And so then he meets his daddy again. His daddy falls ill, and he realizes, oh, I need to be a better person in my family and take care of him and all that stuff, and he learns a moral value. And so everyone becomes happy again. This has to feel kind of a Christmas Carol, per se. It also has the feel of the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, per se, Mama. I'm dead serious. It's the same plot. Some guy interviews some person, known figurine and all that stuff. And yeah, so yeah, he ends up making a 10,000 page word article in what was supposed to be a 400 word article, and it becomes a hit. He's the cover of the magazine. Mr. Rogers, that is. And so everyone gets to see his magazine with his daddy, who is still recovering in bed, Mama. And then Mr. Rogers comes in and gives a pumpkin pie. Because it just happens to be Thanksgiving time. It's time for giving and thanking and all that wonderful stuff. And so then they're all happy. And then, unfortunately, the dad ends up passing away because of illness. But they makes the man a much better person. That, you know, the dad who is taking care of his wife and his baby, and he's going to be taking care of it more often. And so that brings us to the end of this movie, which also shows the animation, like the transitional scenes like you would in the original Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood episode, which is really, really nostalgic and cool. I, for one, love this movie because who doesn't love Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Mama? And this is a great way to show how awesome he is and how impactful he can be in life. Because we all need a neighbor, don't we? This is Willie B.A. Hobo saying, neighbor! You got a neighbor! I'm coming to pick you up! Come on, neighbor! Come on! I promise I can be as friendly and cool and impactful as Mr. Rogers!